The oldest millionaire went to the restaurant where the waitress worked to celebrate his divorce. Upon hearing his sarcastic speech about love, she challenged him, changing his view on life. Marina nervously adjusted her white apron as she watched her reflection in the mirror of the Rothschild mansion's luxurious bathroom. At 28, she had never imagined finding herself in this situation. 3 months pregnant and desperately trying to hide her status from the richest man in Greenwich, Connecticut. The mansion of Richard Rothschild, a 35-year-old financial magnate, had been her workplace for almost 2 years. As head housekeeper, Marina coordinated a team of employees and kept the 20,000 square meter estate spotless. Her job was her life, her source of livelihood, and now, her biggest cause for concern. Is everything all right in there? The voice of Alice, the cook, sounded from the other side of the door. Yes, just a moment. Marina took a deep breath, straightened her apron one last time and left the bathroom, forcing a smile. Alice, a 60-year-old woman who had worked for the Rothschilds for decades, gave her a worried look. Darling, that's the 3rd time today you've run to the bathroom. Are you sure you're all right? Just an upset stomach, Marina lied, feeling the weight of guilt. Alice was like a mother to her, but the fewer people who knew about her pregnancy, the better. On the other side of the mansion, Richard Rothschild watched the estate through the window of his office on the 2nd floor. His blue eyes, normally focused on graphs and financial reports, discreetly followed Marina's figure as she crossed the garden towards the staff house. So you still haven't told her, you know? Nancy, his personal assistant for 15 years, asked as she organized some documents on her desk. Richard ran a hand through his brown hair, a gesture that betrayed his unease. No, and you keep it secret, as you promised. Of course, but, Nancy hesitated. Don't you think she deserves to know that her job is safe? The poor girl must be terrified. Richard turned to his mahogany desk, picking up the small diamond ring he had been keeping in his drawer for weeks. It's not that simple, Nancy. I don't want her to accept my proposal for fear of losing her job. The story between Richard and Marina had begun discreetly, almost imperceptibly. Small moments shared in the mornings when she brought him his coffee. Casual conversations that gradually became longer and more meaningful. A kiss stolen during a storm, when they were stuck in the greenhouse in the garden. 2 lonely souls who found comfort in each other, despite the social differences that separated them. Marina had grown up in an orphanage in Boston, building her life with determination and hard work. Richard, despite his fortune, carried his own scars. The loss of his parents in a helicopter crash 5 years ago, and the constant pressure of running a financial empire. Mr. Rothschild? Marina's voice sounded through the intercom. Mr. Anderson has arrived for the 2 o'clock meeting. Richard quickly put the ring away. Thank you, Marina. Please lead him here. While he waited, Richard watched Marina lead her visitor through the garden. His heart squeezed as he noticed how she unconsciously put her hand to her stomach when she thought no one was looking. In the kitchen later that day, Marina was preparing Richard's afternoon tea when a wave of nausea hit her. Alice immediately ran to help her. My dear, no more lies, Alice said softly, holding her hands. I recognize the signs. How many months? Marina collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. 3 months. Please, Alice, don't tell anyone. I can't lose this job. Alice sat down next to her, her eyes gentle. Marina, do you really think Mr. Rothschild would fire you for this? He's not that kind of person. It's not just that, Marina whispered. The baby, it's his. The silence that followed was deafening. Alice processed the information while Marina trembled. Years of secrets finally coming to light. In the office, Richard was finishing his meeting, his mind divided between business and the woman who carried his child. He knew he had to act soon, but he wanted to do it the right way. Not out of obligation, not out of duty, but out of love. As night fell over the Rothschild mansion, Marina lay on her bed in the staff house, her hands protectively on her still imperceptible belly. In the main room of the mansion, Richard once again held the diamond ring, planning the perfect moment to change their lives forever. The secret that bound them together was about to become the bridge that would remove all barriers between them. But first, They would both need to find the courage to face their truths and their deepest fears. The light of dawn filtered through the silk curtains of Richard Rothschild's office as he gazed at an old photograph on his desk. The picture showed his parents in front of the Empire State Building, smiling and full of life, just a week before the fateful helicopter crash. 5 years had passed, but the pain of loss still reverberated in her chest. The soft sound of footsteps in the hallway announced Marina's arrival with her breakfast. Like every morning for the last 2 years, she entered with a silver tray. But today there was something different about her movements and extra caution, almost imperceptible to anyone who didn't know her as well as he did. "Good morning, Mr. Rothschild," she said, her voice controlled as she placed the tray on the side table. "I've brought wholemeal toast today, since Dr. Stevens recommended a healthier diet." Richard watched as she unconsciously adjusted her apron once more, trying to disguise what was not yet visible to the eyes of others. His heart squeezed at the sight of her discomfort. "Marina," he called softly, causing her to freeze momentarily. "Please, sit down for a moment." She hesitated, her hands clasped nervously in front of her body. "Sir, I have a lot of work in the kitchen and—" "Just a moment," he insisted gently, indicating the leather armchair opposite his desk. Marina sat stiffly, her back erect and tense. Richard noticed how she avoided his gaze, focusing on some point on the wall behind him. "Do you remember that night in the greenhouse?" he asked softly, noticing how her cheeks blushed instantly. How could she forget? The storm had arrived without warning, turning a simple task of checking the rare orchids into a moment that would change their lives. The wind howled outside, but inside the greenhouse, enveloped in the scent of the flowers and the humid heat, they had found each other in a way that neither of them had planned. "Mr. Rothschild, please," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Richard," he corrected. "When we're alone, it's Richard, remember?" A distant thunder echoed, as if the sky itself wanted to participate in that tense moment. Marina finally met his eyes, and Richard saw in them all the fear and uncertainty she carried. "We need to talk about that night," he continued, "and all the others that followed." "There's nothing to talk about," Marina replied quickly, standing up. "It was a mistake, we both know that. I'm your employee and—" "In the woman I love," Richard added, his voice firm but gentle. The silence that followed was deafening. Marina sat down again, her legs shaking too much to keep her upright. "You can't be serious," she whispered. Richard stood up, reaching around his desk to approach her. "I've never been so serious in my life. Marina, I know about the baby." The shock on her face was immediate. "How?" "Nancy saw your medical tests when they fell out of your bag last week," he explained softly. "She told me because she cares about you, just like I do." Tears began to stream down Marina's face. "I was going to tell you, I swear. I was scared," he added, kneeling down beside her. "I know, and it breaks my heart to know that you've been going through this alone for the last few weeks." "Richard, I don't want your pity," she said, trying to pull herself together. "I don't need you to feel obliged to—" "Obliged?" he interrupted, taking her hands between his. "Marina, I bought this ring 3 weeks ago, before I even knew about the baby." He took the small velvet box out of his pocket, and Marina gasped at the sight of the delicate diamond ring. But your family, your social position, what will people say?" Richard smiled, wiping a tear from his cheek with his thumb. "My only family now are you and our son, and as for people, well, they'll always say something, no matter what we do." At that moment, Alice appeared in the office doorway, stopping abruptly when she saw the scene in front of her. "Oh, I'm sorry, Alice, please come in," Richard called out. "Actually, your presence is very timely. As the person who knows Marina best in this house, I'd like you to be the first to know. I'm asking for her hand in marriage." Alice brought her hands to her face, her eyes watering. "Oh, finally. I was wondering how much longer it would take you two to admit what everyone already knew." Marina looked at the cook in surprise. "Everyone?" "Darling," Alice smiled. "Your love for each other is as obvious as the sun rising every morning. Only you couldn't see it yourselves." Richard turned his attention to Marina, still holding her hands. "So, what do you say?" Do you agree to become Mrs. Rothschild? Marina looked at the ring, at Alice, and finally at Richard. In his eyes, she saw all the love and security she had always sought in her life. There was no more fear, no more doubt. Yes, she replied, her voice laced with emotion. Yes, I accept. As Richard placed the ring on her finger, Alice discreetly left the office, leaving the couple in their moment of happiness. Outside, the storm passed, and a ray of sunshine broke through the clouds, illuminating the greenhouse where it all began. Marina and Richard sealed their engagement with a tender kiss, aware that their journey was just beginning. The baby growing in Marina's womb would not only be proof of their love, but also the beginning of a new Rothschild family, built not on fortunes and titles, but on true love and mutual trust. The news of Richard Rothschild and Marina's engagement spread through the mansion like fire through dry straw. In less than 24 hours, all the staff were already commenting on the unexpected romance between the millionaire and the housekeeper, some with genuine joy, others with ill-concealed envy. Nancy watched the different reactions as she organized Richard's schedule that morning. As a personal assistant for 15 years, she had witnessed several crucial moments in the Rothschilds' lives, including the tragic loss of Richard's parents. Now, for the first time in a long time, she saw a genuine smile on her boss's face. Nancy, I need you to organize a press conference, Richard said, adjusting his tie as he entered the office. I want to make an official announcement before the tabloids start speculating. I'm already one step ahead, Nancy replied, showing a list on her tablet. I've contacted the main media outlets and scheduled it for tomorrow at 10 a.m. I've also booked the ballroom at the Bristol Hotel. Richard smiled, grateful for his assistant's efficiency. What would I do without you, Nancy? I'd probably still be trying to pluck up the courage to talk to Marina, she joked, making him laugh. On the other side of the mansion, Marina was facing her own challenges. Sitting in the kitchen with Alice, she was trying to process the avalanche of changes in her life. Darling, you need to start seeing yourself as the future Mrs. Rothschild, Alice said, pouring herself some ginger tea to help with the morning nausea. You can't keep wearing your governess uniform. Marina looked at her apron with a mixture of nostalgia and apprehension. It's all so sudden, Alice. Yesterday I was hiding my pregnancy, and today I'm Richard Rothschild's fiancée. And don't forget the little life growing in there, Alice smiled, placing her hand on Marina's still imperceptible belly. This baby is a blessing, not a secret to be ashamed of. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Sophia Martinez, the personal stylist Nancy had called. With her high heels echoing on the marble floor and designer glasses balanced on her perfectly made-up nose, Sophia represented everything Marina wasn't, or at least didn't think she was. So you're the bride, Sophia exclaimed, looking Marina up and down with a professional eye. Darling, we have a lot of work ahead of us. The press will be all over your every detail from now on. Marina felt panic rise in her chest. Press? The press conference is tomorrow, Sophia explained, already making notes on her cell phone. We need to turn you into the perfect bride for one of the richest men on the East Coast. No pressure, of course. Alice noticed Marina's discomfort and intervened. Perhaps we could start with something simpler? Marina has her own style that we should respect. Sophia stopped her notes and looked more closely at Marina. Beneath the simple uniform and makeup-free face, there was a natural beauty and dignity that impressed her. You know what? Alice is right, Sophia declared, softening her tone. Let's work on your strengths. No dramatic transformations, just bringing out who you already are. Meanwhile, at the office, Richard was facing a less pleasant liaison with his Aunt Eleanor, the Rothschilds' only living relative. A scandal, that's what it's going to be. Eleanor's shrill voice sounded over the speakerphone. Marrying a maid? Richard, your parents must be turning in their graves. My parents always taught me that a person's character is worth more than their social status, Richard replied firmly. Marina is the woman I love, and she will soon be the mother of my child. This is my final decision, Aunt Eleanor. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Eleanor sighed in defeat. At least tell me she has some formal education. Marina has a degree in business administration from Boston University, Richard replied proudly. She worked as a housekeeper by choice, not for lack of options. In the main dressing room, Sophia was helping Marina try on different looks for the press conference. Alice watched approvingly as the stylist respected Marina's reserved nature, suggesting elegant but comfortable pieces. "This navy blue dress is perfect," Sophia declared. "Sophisticated without being ostentatious, and the color brings out your eyes." Marina looked in the mirror, hardly recognizing the elegant woman she saw reflected. The flowing crepe midi dress hugged her curves subtly, and the low-heeled shoes provided height without compromising comfort. "Richard will love it," Alice commented, her eyes watering with pride. As if summoned by their thoughts, Richard appeared in the doorway. When he saw Marina in her new dress, his eyes lit up with admiration. "You look stunning," he said, moving closer to kiss her forehead. "But you really would in any outfit?" Sophia and Alice exchanged complicit glances and discreetly left the couple alone. In the corridor, they met Nancy, who was coordinating the last details of the press conference. "How's she doing?" Nancy asked, concerned. "Better than we expected," Sophia replied. "There's a natural strength about her that no etiquette course could ever teach." In the bedroom, Richard held Marina's hands between his. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" "Honestly, I'm terrified," she admitted. "All these people, the cameras, the questions. I'll be by your side the whole time," he promised. "Besides, you've faced much worse. You grew up in an orphanage, built your life from scratch, managed this huge mansion. A press conference is a piece of cake compared to all that." Marina laughed, feeling some of her anxiety dissipate. Richard was right, she was stronger than she thought. Together, they could face any challenge that came their way. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of preparations, fittings, and rehearsals for the press conference. When night finally fell on the Rothschild mansion, Marina lay on her new bed in the master bedroom, still trying to get used to the idea that this was now her place. Richard hugged her from behind, his hand resting protectively on her belly. "Sleep well, my love. Tomorrow we start a new chapter in our lives." Marina intertwined her fingers with his, feeling truly at home for the first time in a long time. The conference room at the Bristol Hotel was buzzing with dozens of journalists and photographers. The growing buzz was an indication of how anxious the couple were to arrive for the most eagerly awaited press conference of the week in Greenwich. Backstage, Marina was adjusting her navy blue dress for the last time, while Nancy was putting the finishing touches to her soft makeup. Her hands were shaking slightly as she held the glass of water. "Take a deep breath," Nancy instructed gently. "Remember what we rehearsed. You don't have to answer anything that makes you uncomfortable." Richard entered the preparation room, impeccable in his gray Italian suit. His countenance showed concern as he noticed his fiancée's nervousness. "We can postpone this if you're not ready." "No," Marina replied resolutely. "The longer we put it off, the more speculation will arise. Let's face it now." "That's my girl," Alice smiled proudly, adjusting a loose strand of Marina's hair. The couple entered the conference room hand in hand, facing the glare of the flashbulbs and the buzz of the cameras. Richard, used to the spotlight from a young age, led Marina safely and securely to the head table. "Good morning, everyone," Richard began, his voice firm on the microphone. "Thank you for coming this morning. We're here to make an official announcement. Marina Santos and I are engaged and expecting our first child." The momentary silence was broken by an explosion of simultaneous questions. Richard, with his years of experience dealing with the press, managed the questions masterfully. "Mr. Rothschild, is it true that Miss Santos was your maid?" "Marina was, and still is much more than that," Richard replied with dignity. "She is a trained professional, an extraordinary woman who won my heart not because of her position, but because of her character." A more aggressive journalist stood up. "Miss Santos, there are rumors that this pregnancy was planned to secure your social position. How do you respond to that?" Marina felt her blood run cold, but the comforting pressure of Richard's hand on hers gave her courage. "Our son wasn't planned, but he is deeply loved. As for my social position, I've built my life on honest work and education. I don't need a marriage to validate me as a person." Her firm and dignified response caused a wave of approval among some of the journalists present. Richard looked at her with even more admiration. At the back of the room, Eleanor Rothschild looked on with an indecipherable expression. Her unannounced presence caused an additional buzz among those present. "Aunt Eleanor," Richard said in surprise, "we weren't expecting you." The matriarch of the Rothschilds stood up, her aristocratic bearing imposing a natural silence on the room. "I've come to personally observe the woman who won over my nephew," she declared, approaching the couple. "And I must say I'm impressed by your composure, Miss Santos." The moment of tension was broken by the loud sound of doors opening. A middle-aged woman, dressed simply but elegantly, rushed in. "Marina," she called out, her voice broken. Marina stood up abruptly, her face losing color. "Sister Beatrice?" The nun who had looked after Marina at the orphanage crossed the room, completely ignoring the flashes of the cameras. The two embraced emotionally, tears flowing shamelessly. "When I saw your picture in the papers this morning, I could hardly believe it," Sister Beatrice explained, holding Marina's face between her hands. "Our little Marina, always so determined." Richard watched the scene with restrained emotion, understanding his fiancée's story even more deeply. Eleanor Rothschild, for her part, seemed to reevaluate her initial impressions. "Miss Santos," Eleanor said, her voice softer than usual, "it seems you have a more extensive family than we imagined." "Marina has always been special," Sister Beatrice declared with maternal pride. "Even in the most difficult circumstances, she never lost her dignity or kindness." The press conference turned into something much more significant than a simple engagement announcement. It became a moment of reconciliation, acceptance, and the coming together of different worlds. At the end of the event, as the journalists began to disperse, Eleanor approached Marina. "My dear," she said, surprising everyone with her affectionate tone, "I'd like to invite you to tea tomorrow. I have some family jewels that would look perfect on you on your wedding day." Marina looked at Richard, who was smiling with excitement, and then at Sister Beatrice, who nodded encouragingly. "It would be an honor, Mrs. Rothschild," she replied sincerely. As they left the hotel, protected by security, Marina reflected on how her life had changed so drastically. From orphan to governess, from governess to fiancée of one of the richest men in the country, and now mother-to-be. "You were amazing today," Richard whispered in her ear as they got into the limousine. "We were amazing," she corrected, resting her head on his shoulder. Together, in the back seat of the car, Marina watched the city go by through the window, her hand unconsciously caressing her belly. The engagement ring sparkled on her finger, no longer as a status symbol, but as a promise of true love and family. Sister Beatrice's unexpected presence and Eleanor's change of attitude had turned a potentially tense moment into a celebration of togetherness and acceptance. The baby growing in her womb would not only be a Rothschild heir, but a symbol of how true love can transcend social barriers and unite seemingly distant hearts. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Richard's office as he went over the last details of the prenuptial agreement his lawyers had prepared. It wasn't his idea, but Eleanor had insisted, arguing that it was common practice in families like the Rothschilds. What her aunt didn't know was that Richard planned to include extremely generous clauses, ensuring that Marina and the baby would never have to worry about financial matters, whatever happened. "Are you sure about this?" Nancy asked, looking at the astronomical figures on the document. "It's a considerable sum, even by Rothschild standards." Richard smiled, signing the last page with determination. "Marina never asked for any of it. In fact, she'll probably protest when she finds out. But I want to make sure that our son and she are always protected." On the other side of the mansion, Marina was facing her own challenge. The first official meeting with Eleanor Rothschild for the promised tea. Alice helped her dress, opting for an elegant but discreet outfit in shades of aqua gris. "Remember," Alice advised as she adjusted the pearl necklace around Marina's neck, "Mrs. Eleanor may seem intimidating, but she only wants what's best for the family. Show her who you really are." Marina took a deep breath, her hands instinctively resting on the small bulge that was beginning to form on her belly. "What if she never accepts me completely, Alice? What if I'm never Rothschild enough?" "Darling," Alice held her hands firmly, "you're already more Rothschild than you realize. You have the same strength and dignity as the late Mrs. Catherine, Richard's mother." She also faced resistance when she married Mr. James. Did you know that? This information took Marina by surprise. What do you mean? Catherine came from a family of university professors, Alice explained, her eyes sparkling with old memories. The Rothschilds of that time thought she wasn't up to it, but James loved her and fought for her, just as Richard is doing for you. The sound of heels in the hallway announced Sophia's arrival, carrying several bags of famous brands. Sorry I'm late. I've brought some auctions for the official engagement dinner. Eleanor insisted on specific brands. Marina looked at the astronomical price tags and felt a pang of anxiety. Is all this really necessary? What is necessary? A familiar voice sounded from the doorway. Is for you to feel comfortable and confident. Richard entered the room, his eyes shining at the sight of Marina. He approached and kissed her softly, ignoring the complicit smiles of Alice and Sophia. I have a surprise for you, he announced, handing her an envelope. Sister Beatrice called this morning. She found something you might want to see. Marina opened the envelope with curiosity, her eyes filling with tears as she saw its contents. An old photo of her as a baby, in the arms of a young woman with a gentle smile. It's her birth mother, Richard explained softly. Sister Beatrice has kept the photo all these years. Her name was Isabel Santos. She was a nursing student when you were born. Marina touched the photograph with trembling fingers. Why did she leave me? She died during childbirth, Richard replied gently. But she left you a letter. Sister Beatrice was waiting for the right moment to deliver it. Alice and Sophia discreetly left, leaving the couple alone with this intimate moment. Marina unfolded the weathered letter, her heart pounding as she read the words of a mother she had never met. My little Marina, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't be with you as I dreamed. But I want you to know that you are loved from the very first moment. I chose your name because it means of the sea, vast, deep, and full of infinite possibilities. Never doubt your strength or your worth. You are the best gift I could ever give the world. With all my love, your mother, Isabel. Richard hugged Marina as she cried, her tears a mixture of joy and sadness. Now I understand, she whispered, why I always felt so connected to the winter garden, especially the orchids. Sister Beatrice mentioned that my mother loved flowers. And that's why I had this made. Richard took a small box out of his pocket. Inside was a delicate white gold brooch in the shape of an orchid, set with small diamonds. It's for you to wear to tea with Eleanor today, he explained. But it's not just a piece of jewelry, it's a symbol of who you are, delicate but strong, rare and incredibly resilient. Marina touched the brooch reverently, understanding its deeper meaning. It wasn't just an expensive accessory, it was a bridge between her past and her future, between the orphan girl she had been and the woman she was becoming. Thank you, she whispered, not just for the brooch, but for helping me find those lost parts of myself. The sound of the clock reminding her that it was time for tea with Eleanor broke the intimate moment. Marina stood up, drying her tears and adjusting the brooch on her blazer. I'll go with you, Richard offered, but she gently declined. No, this is a moment I need to face alone. Besides, she smiled, touching the letter from her mother. Now I know I was never really alone. As Marina walked through the halls of the mansion towards the tea room, she carried with her not only the orchid brooch, but also a new understanding of herself. She was Marina Santos, Isabel's daughter, Richard's future wife, and soon-to-be mother. Every part of her story, including the emptiness and loss, had shaped her for this moment. Eleanor Rothschild was waiting, imposing in her Chanel ensemble, but Marina was no longer intimidated. For the first time, she was truly ready for this meeting, not as the governess she was trying to fit in, but as the woman she was always meant to be. Tea with Eleanor Rothschild was surprisingly pleasant. Sitting in the elegant living room of the mansion, Marina discovered that behind the austere facade of the Rothschild matriarch, there was a woman who, like her, was well aware of the weight of social expectations. You know, my dear, Eleanor commented as she poured more tea into delicate china cups. Catherine, Richard's mother, also faced resistance when she married James. But she had something that few understood at the time, an extraordinary inner strength. Marina unconsciously touched the orchid brooch on her blazer. Alice told me a bit about it earlier today. It must have been difficult for her. It was, Eleanor confirmed, her eyes fixed on the brooch. I see Richard gave you Catherine's brooch. Marina froze. This was, yes, Eleanor smiled softly. Catherine loved orchids. Richard must have seen something of her in you. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Nancy, carrying a thick folder. Sorry to intrude, but the preparations for the engagement dinner need to be finalized. Eleanor examined the details with a critical eye. 300 guests? Is Richard mad? Marina has barely had time to adjust to her new position. Actually, Marina intervened gently. I'd like to suggest something different. The two women looked at her curiously. Instead of a big social event, I was thinking of something more intimate. Marina continued. Perhaps we could have 2 celebrations, a small family gathering first, including the people from the orphanage, and then a larger charity event where guests could make donations to charities instead of gifts. Eleanor put down her cup, a gleam of approval in her eyes. Interesting. Go on. The orphanage where I grew up, for example, is always in need of funds, and there are so many other institutions that do wonderful work. Turning a social occasion into an opportunity to help others, Eleanor reflected. Catherine would have loved that idea. Nancy was already furiously taking notes. We could organize a silent auction during the event, with works of art and exclusive experiences. The Rothschilds have an extensive network of contacts who could contribute, and we could invite other influential families not just to celebrate, but to get involved in important causes, Marina added, her face lighting up with enthusiasm. Eleanor watched Marina with a new look of respect. This wasn't just a housekeeper who had won over her nephew, this was a woman with vision and compassion. You know, Eleanor said, getting up to open an old jewelry chest, I think I've found the perfect piece for you to wear on your wedding day. She took out a delicate diadem of sapphires and diamonds. This belonged to my grandmother, then to Catherine. She always said it should be worn by someone who understood that privilege comes with responsibility. Marina felt tears forming in her eyes as Eleanor gently placed the diadem on her head. It's an immense honor. The honor, Eleanor interrupted softly, is mine. Welcome to the family, Marina. The moment was captured by Richard, who had quietly arrived at the door. His eyes shone with emotion at seeing the 2 most important women in his life finally connected. I see you two are getting on well, he commented, coming over to kiss Marina's forehead and hug her aunt. Your fiancé has just revolutionized all our plans for the engagement dinner, Eleanor informed him with a smile. Brilliantly, I might add. Richard didn't seem surprised. Marina has always had a gift for turning conventional situations into something meaningful, like turning a simple governess into a Rothschild, Marina joked, but her voice trembled slightly. No, Richard corrected seriously. How to turn a lonely man focused only on business into someone who finally understands the true meaning of family and purpose? Eleanor discreetly wiped away a tear. Well, I think we need to start planning these celebrations. Nancy, please prepare a list of charities for us to evaluate. I already have some suggestions, Marina offered. Sister Beatrice told me about several projects that need support. While the women discussed the details, Richard watched with satisfaction. His mother had always said that true nobility didn't lie in titles or fortunes, but in actions that had a positive impact on the lives of others. Marina, without even realizing it, was honoring this legacy. Later, as the sun began to set, Marina found Richard in his office, gazing at a photo of his parents. They would have loved you, he said without turning around, especially your idea for the engagement dinner. Marina hugged him from behind, resting her head on his back. I want to honor your memory and your legacy, not just as your wife, but as part of this family. Richard turned to face her, gently touching the diadem she still wore. You're already honoring it, my love. Every day a little more. The phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Sister Beatrice, with news about Isabel's letter. I found some more of her belongings, the nun informed her, including a diary. Would you like to see them? Marina looked at Richard, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, please. Can we come over tomorrow? As she hung up the phone, Marina felt a peace she hadn't experienced for a long time. Her past and her future were no longer conflicting forces. but parts of a bigger story that continued to unfold. "You know," she said to Richard, "I think I finally understand what it means to really belong somewhere." Richard hugged her, his hands gently resting on her growing belly. "And this is just the beginning of our story." The day dawned overcast when Richard and Marina arrived at St. Mary's Orphanage in Boston. The Victorian building, with its red brick walls and tall windows, seemed smaller than Marina remembered, but it still emanated the same aura of quiet dignity that had marked her childhood. Sister Beatrice was waiting for them at the entrance, her black habit contrasting with her warm smile. In her hands, she held an old wooden box, weathered but carefully preserved. "This box belonged to your mother," she explained as she led the couple to her office. "Isabel left it here with specific instructions for it to be delivered to you when it was ready." Marina sat down, her hands trembling slightly as they touched the varnished surface of the box. Richard stood beside her, a silent but comforting presence. "How did you know that now was the right time?" Marina asked the nun. Sister Beatrice smiled gently. "When I saw your picture in the papers, not just as Richard Rothschild's fiancée, but as a woman about to become a mother, I knew Isabel would be proud. This is the moment she's been waiting for." Marina carefully opened the box. Inside, she found a diary bound in blue leather, several old photographs, and a yellowed envelope addressed simply, "To my daughter." "I'll leave you two alone," Sister Beatrice said softly, leaving the office. Marina opened the diary first, recognizing the delicate handwriting she had already seen in the first letter. The pages contained not only thoughts and feelings, but also dreams and hopes for the future, a future that Isabel knew she might not share with her daughter. "She knew she was ill," Marina whispered, her tears falling onto the pages. "She had a congenital heart condition, but she chose to go through with the pregnancy anyway." Richard held her hand as she read aloud a particularly moving passage. "My dear child, the doctors say my chances are slim, but I don't care. Your every movement inside me is a miracle, a promise that something of me will remain in this world. I chose your name with the sea in mind, vast, deep, full of mysteries and possibilities. Like the sea, you will be strong. Like the sea, you will be free." The photographs showed a young Isabel at various times, graduating from high school, volunteering in a hospital, tending the orphanage's orchid garden, the same garden that would later become Marina's refuge. "Look," Richard pointed to one photo in particular. "She's wearing an orchid brooch very similar to yours." Marina examined the image more closely and felt her heart skip a beat. It was exactly the same model that Richard had given her, only newer. "How is that possible?" she asked, confused. Richard smiled, his eyes shining with restrained tears. "Remember when I mentioned that the brooch belonged to my mother? Well, that wasn't the whole story. My mother volunteered at this very orphanage during college. She knew Isabel." The revelation hit Marina like a wave. "Your mother knew my mother?" "More than that," he continued, leafing through the diary until he found a specific entry. "Look at the date, April 15th, 1995. Marina read it out loud. "Today, Catherine Rothschild came to the orphanage again. She has such a kind heart, always bringing books and toys for the children. When I told her about my pregnancy and my condition, she cried with me and promised that whatever happened, she would make sure that my baby would never be left helpless. Her orchid brooch caught my eye, so delicate and strong at the same time. She insisted on giving it to me as a present, saying that orchids represent love, beauty, and strength. So it wasn't a coincidence," Marina whispered, touching the brooch on her blazer. "Somehow, our stories were already connected." "My mother never told me about Isabel," Richard said softly. "She passed away before she could share that story. But when I found the brooch among her belongings, along with some old photos from the orphanage, something told me it should be yours." Sister Beatrice returned with a cup of tea for Marina, who was now weeping openly. "Your mother was a special soul," the nun commented, "and Catherine Rothschild too. They shared the same vision of love and compassion." Marina opened the final envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, she found one last letter and a small antique key. "The key is to the orchid garden," Sister Beatrice explained. "Isabel left specific instructions for the garden to be preserved for you. That's why I always allowed you to spend so much time there as a child. Isabel's last letter was brief but powerful. My Marina, if you're reading this, it means you've found your way in the world. I don't know what kind of life you will have lived so far, but I do know that it will be extraordinary because you carry within you not only my love, but also the love of all those who promise to look after you. The orchids in the garden are like you, they need care and patience to bloom. But when they do, their beauty is incomparable. Look after them as I know you will look after your own children one day. With eternal love, Mom. Richard hugged Marina as she processed all the revelations, the unlikely connections, the invisible threads that had woven their lives together long before they met, now seemed part of a bigger plan. I think I know what I want to do, Marina finally said, wiping away her tears. I want to turn the orchid garden into a bigger space, a place where other children can find the same comfort I found. A joy project between the Rothschild and Santos foundations, Richard suggested, smiling. Isabel and Catherine would be proud, Sister Beatrice agreed, her eyes shining. When they left the orphanage that afternoon, Marina carried not only the box with her mother's memories, but also a new sense of purpose. Her past and her future had intertwined in ways she could never have imagined, creating a pattern as delicate and complex as the orchids that had meant so much in her life. The transformation of the orchid garden at St. Mary's Orphanage became a project that consumed Marina and Richard's every free moment. In the weeks that followed the discovery of Isabel's diary, the couple dedicated themselves to expanding the space that had meant so much to so many people. It's amazing how things connect, Marina commented as she supervised the installation of new greenhouses. Her 5-month belly was already visible under her light summer dress. My mother cared for these orchids, your mother admired them, and now we're here, building something new on those memories. Richard, who was talking to the landscape architects, approached her, and our son or daughter will continue this story. Eleanor Rothschild, who had surprisingly become an enthusiast for the project, arrived bringing detailed plans for the new therapeutic wing of the garden. Catherine always said that flowers have the power to heal souls, she commented, her eyes softening at the mention of her late daughter-in-law. When I first met her, I found her here, teaching the children how to look after the orchids. That's when I realized that she would be perfect for James. Marina smiled, unconsciously touching the orchid brooch she now rarely took off. What was she like, Catherine? Eleanor sat down on one of the new benches in the garden, her countenance nostalgic. A lot like you, actually. Determined, compassionate, and with an inner strength that few understood. When James brought her to meet the family, many turned up their noses. They thought that a mere university professor wasn't up to the Rothschild surname. How did she handle it? Marina asked, taking a seat next to the matriarch. With grace and dignity, Eleanor smiled. And with projects like this, she turned part of the Rothschild fortune into tools for social change. James loved her for it. Richard approached with an old box that Sister Beatrice had just brought. Look what we found in the orphanage archives. Inside the box were old photographs of the original garden, some showing Catherine and Isabel working together among the flowers. In one of them, particularly touching, the two women were smiling at the camera, Catherine with her orchid brooch and Isabel pregnant, her hands on her belly. This photo was taken just 2 weeks before. Sister Beatrice didn't complete the sentence, but everyone understood. 2 weeks before Isabel left, leaving her little Marina in the care of the orphanage. She looked so happy, Marina whispered, tracing the outline of her mother's face on the photograph. She was, Sister Beatrice confirmed, and Catherine came every day after Isabel died, looking after the orchids and checking on you, even from afar. She wanted to respect the orphanage's process, but she always kept her promise to ensure your well-being. Richard held Marina's hand, realizing how fate had woven a complex plot to bring them together. Now I understand why my mother was so insistent on keeping the donations to St. Mary's, even when other advisors suggested different institutions. Nancy, who had arrived to discuss the details of the event to inaugurate the new garden, watched the scene with emotion. Mr. Rothschild, I found something in the archives of the mansion that you might want to look at. She handed Richard a yellowed envelope. Inside was a letter from Catherine, dated a few days before the accident that took her life. My dear Richard, there are stories that need the right time to be told. By the time you read this letter, I hope you will have found your way to St. Mary's Orchid Garden, and perhaps even to little Marina. Isabel taught me that true love transcends time and circumstances. Her orchid brooch, which is now my most precious treasure, represents this truth. Keep it for the right moment, for the right person. Love, Mom. The silence that followed was filled only by the gentle swaying of the orchids in the afternoon breeze. Marina, with tears in her eyes, realized that the garden would be much more than a charity project. It would be a living memorial to two extraordinary women who, even without knowing it, had paved the way for her happiness. The inauguration event will be next month, Nancy commented softly, consulting her calendar. Coincidentally, or perhaps not, it will be on Isabel's birthday. And also the day Catherine first came to the orphanage, Sister Beatrice added. Some coincidences are too strong to ignore. Eleanor stood up, her aristocratic bearing mingled with a new softness. Then we will make this garden not only a place of healing and hope, but also a tribute to Elizabeth and Catherine, a place where their stories will live on through the generations. Marina looked around, at the new greenhouses under construction, at the beds being prepared, at the spaces that would soon be filled with children learning about love and care through flowers. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the baby's gentle movements. I think I already know what to name our son or daughter, she said softly to Richard. If it's a girl, Catherine Isabel. If it's a boy, James Gabriel. Richard hugged her, overcome with emotion, while Eleanor discreetly wiped away a tear. The orchid garden, silent witness to so many stories of love and loss, of hope and renewal, would continue its mission to unite hearts and heal souls, now with an even deeper meaning. The day of the inauguration of the new orchid garden at St. Mary's Orphanage dawned with a special glow. Marina, now 6 months pregnant, watched the final preparations through the window of Sister Beatrice's old office, which had been transformed into a small museum dedicated to the memory of Isabel Santos and Catherine Rothschild. It's amazing how everything fits together, Nancy commented, adjusting the photographs on the wall. A visual timeline showed the evolution of the garden, from its early days under Isabel's care to its current expansion, as if fate had been weaving this story for decades. Marina gently touched the glass case where her mother's original diary was on display. Sometimes I wonder if they knew, if somehow Catherine and Isabel sensed that their stories would continue through us. Richard entered the office, carrying an old box that Eleanor had found in the attic of the Rothschild mansion. "We've found something else that belongs here," he announced, pulling out a carefully preserved photo album. The pages revealed never-before-seen moments. Catherine and Isabel in the garden, planning the arrangement of the orchids, the two women in a nearby cafe, sharing smiles and secrets, Isabel pregnant, beaming as Catherine helped her choose baby clothes. "Your mother kept all this," Marina whispered, touched. Even after she left," Eleanor added, entering the room. Catherine never completely got over the loss of Isabel. That's why she dedicated herself so much to this place, to these flowers. The sound of excited voices coming from the garden caught everyone's attention. The first guests were beginning to arrive for the opening ceremony. Among them were several children from the orphanage, all wearing personalized gardening aprons, a special gift from the Rothschild Santos Foundation. "Marina," Sister Beatrice called softly from the doorway, "there is someone special who would like to meet you." An elderly woman entered the office, leaning on a cane decorated with small hand-painted orchids. Her eyes, although aged, shone with a familiar liveliness. "I'm Margaret Sullivan," she introduced herself, her voice trembling slightly. "I was your mother's teacher at nursing school." Marina felt her legs go weak, and Richard quickly brought her a chair to sit on. Margaret continued, "Isabel was my most dedicated student. When she found out about her heart condition, she spent nights studying similar cases, looking for alternatives. But in the end, she chose to give me her life," Marina added, tears silently flowing. Margaret nodded, pulling out a yellowed envelope from her handbag. "She gave me this, asking me to give it to her daughter when the time was right. I've kept it all these years, waiting. When I saw the news about the garden in the paper, I knew it was time." With trembling hands, Marina opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, in Isabel's delicate handwriting. My dear child, if you are reading this, it means that the orchid garden has bloomed again, just as you always knew it would. Flowers have their own way of teaching us about life, about how some things need to die so that others can be born. Catherine taught me that true love transcends time and circumstance. Through her, I learned that family is not just about blood, but about choices we make with our hearts. You, my Marina of the sea, are my bravest choice. I chose to give you life knowing that I might not be able to share it with you. But I also chose to trust that love would find a way, and from what I see now, through Margaret, it has. Take care of the orchids, dear. They are silent witnesses to love, loss, and rebirth. And always remember, you are my most precious flower. With eternal love, Mom. The silence in the office was broken only by the restrained sobs of everyone present. Eleanor, normally so composed, openly wiped away her tears. Richard hugged Marina, who held the letter close to her chest. It's time, Nancy announced softly after a few moments. The guests are waiting. Marina stood up, adjusting her dress and touching the orchid brooch. Richard took her hand, and together they walked to the renovated garden, where dozens of people were waiting. Among them, former residents of the orphanage, donors, journalists, and, most importantly, the children who would now have a new space for healing and hope. The new garden was a masterpiece of design and sensitivity. The original greenhouses had been preserved and restored, now surrounded by modern learning and therapy spaces. A winding path, dubbed the Isabel Trail, led visitors through the history of the place, with plaques telling the story of the two women who had started it all. When Marina took to the small stage to give her speech, she felt her mother's presence more strongly than ever. The orchids swayed gently in the breeze, as if they were listening to. This garden, she began, her voice clear and emotional, is more than a memorial or a charity project. It's a promise that two extraordinary women made many years ago, about love, family, and the power of choosing hope even in the most difficult times. The words flowed naturally as she shared the story of Isabel and Catherine, of how their lives intertwine through orchids, and how their legacy lives on through new generations. At the end of the ceremony, while the guests explored the new space, Marina found a quiet moment next to her mother's original orchids. A small plaque read, "Isabel's orchids where it all began. They'll bloom forever now," Richard said softly, joining her. "Just like the love that created this place." Marina smiled, feeling her baby move, as if it too wanted to take part in this moment. "Yes," she replied, "forever." Autumn arrived in Greenwich, bringing with it a soft golden breeze that made the leaves dance in the gardens of the Rothschild mansion. Marina, now in her 8th month of pregnancy, rested on a comfortable chaise longue on the balcony, watching Richard supervise the installation of the nursery in the room next to theirs. "I can't believe you're actually assembling the mobile yourself," she laughed, watching him struggle with the tiny crystal orchids Eleanor had made especially for the baby. "A Rothschild needs to know how to do everything," he replied with a smile, finally managing to hang the last piece. "Besides, I want our little Catherine Isabel to have something made by her father's hands." The previous week's ultrasound had revealed that they were expecting a baby girl, news that made Eleanor cry openly for the first time Marina could remember. The Rothschild matriarch had completely transformed in recent months, dedicating herself to the preparations for her great-granddaughter's arrival with an enthusiasm that surprised everyone. "The orphanage garden is blooming beautifully," Nancy commented, entering the veranda with a folder of reports. "The new orchid seedlings we brought from Thailand have adapted perfectly." The orchid project, as it came to be known, had expanded far beyond initial expectations. In addition to the therapeutic garden at St. Mary's, there were now similar programs in 5 other orphanages along the East Coast, each incorporating elements of Isabel and Catherine's story. "Sister Beatrice called this morning," Marina shared, stroking her prominent belly. "She said they'd found another letter from my mother, hidden between the pages of a botany book." Richard sat down next to her, taking her hand. "And what did it say?" Marina took a folded piece of paper from the pocket of her dress. "My dear Marina, today I planted a new orchid in the garden. It's a rare species, known to bloom only once a year. But when it does, its flowers last for months. Catherine says it's like true love, it needs time and patience to reveal itself. But once it blooms, its beauty is eternal. As I look after this little plant, I think of you, growing inside me. Like this orchid, you too will need time to find your way, to blossom. But I'm sure that when you do, your light will illuminate the world in ways I can't even imagine. With eternal love, Mom, Alice, who had quietly entered with a tray of tea, wiped away a tear. It's amazing how Isabel seemed to know, somehow, that you would find your way back to the orchids. And even the same orchids, Richard added. That rare species she mentions? It's exactly the same one that was blooming in the greenhouse the night we kissed for the first time, Marina added, blushing slightly at the memory. Eleanor joined them on the balcony, carrying an antique jewelry box. I found something else that belonged to Catherine, she announced, opening the box to reveal a delicate sapphire necklace. She wore it on the day Richard was born. Now it must pass to you, to wear when our little Catherine Isabel arrives. Marina touched the blue stones reverently. It's as if they knew, Isabel and Catherine, as if they had planted seeds of love that would take years to fully blossom. True love has its own time, Eleanor reflected, her voice soft. Like your rare orchids? Richard watched the three most important women in his life gathered on the balcony: his aunt, who had transformed from a strict aristocrat into a loving grandmother; his wife, who had brought light and purpose back to the Rothschild mansion; and their unborn daughter, who would carry on the legacy of two extraordinary women. You know, he commented, I think I understand now why my mother spent so much time in the orchid garden at the orphanage. It wasn't just about the flowers or keeping a promise to Isabel. It was about creating connections, planting seeds of love that would continue to grow even after she was gone. Marina felt a strong movement in her stomach and smiled. I think someone agrees with Dad. Nancy, who had been discreetly organizing her papers, looked up. Mr. Rothschild, I've just received confirmation. The board has unanimously approved the creation of the Isabel Catherine Foundation for Child Development. It was the most ambitious project they had conceived so far, an organization dedicated to providing education, emotional support, and opportunities for children in orphanages across the country, with the orchid garden at St. Mary's as its symbolic heart. Isabel would be so proud, Sister Beatrice commented from the doorway, her unexpected arrival surprising everyone. So would Catherine. The nun crossed the balcony to hand Marina a small package. I found this morning when we were reorganizing the orphanage library. It was hidden inside a book about the meaning of flowers. It was an old photograph, already yellowed by time, showing Isabel and Catherine sitting in the orchid garden. On the back, in Catherine's delicate handwriting, was written, "To the future where love and flowers grow eternally." Marina held the photo against her chest, feeling her daughter move once again. The circle was complete: past, present, and future united through love, sacrifice, and the enduring beauty of orchids. As the sun set over Greenwich, casting golden hues over the Rothschild mansion, Marina thought of all the stories she would tell her daughter about her grandmother Isabel, who chose to give life even though she knew she wouldn't be able to see it grow. About Catherine, who kept a promise even after leaving this world. And about how love, like the rarest orchids, has the power to flourish across generations, connecting hearts across time.